and welcome to the Modern Meltdown. It's your host, Matthew Soul, and with me we have another special guest from Oz Comic Con, Australian artist, worked for DC Comics, I should say, is now embarking on an independent project for Image Comics.
Yep.
The one and only, fabulous Nicola Scott.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Now, you've been in the comic book scene for a long time.
Yeah.
But your claim to fame, if I can say this,
Sure.
is that with Tom Taylor, you produced the first Australian comic book for DC Comics.
Yeah, pretty much we had our own planet to play with. It was the first time that there had been an Australian creative team in a mainstream US publication. And that was pretty fun.
It was pretty amazing as an Aussie fan to pick
Yeah.
up that book and be like, 100% Australian made.
We were pretty proud.
Absolutely. Now, you got to explore a different side of these characters that have been established. So if people aren't aware, Earth 2 was a book that featured all the heroes you know, but had a little bit of a twist. And you got to re-explore the origins.
Yeah.
Was that challenging? Daunting?
No, exciting. You know, like the only daunting part of it is the responsibility. Because essentially I feel like, you know, when you're working with these sort of legacy characters that have been around for decades and decades, you're their caretaker for a short window of time. So you want to do the best by them and not fuck it up.
Yep. No, that's absolutely fair enough. No, it's okay.
I'm allowed to swear?
On the Modern
Thank
Meltdown, no censorship at all. So you got to re-envision some cool origins, Batman, Flash, the Jay Garrick version, which everyone's
Yeah.
going to become very familiar with Season 2 of The Flash.
I know, awesome, right?
How cool is that? What was the most challenging origin to revise, and what was the one that was the most fun? So we'll start with the challenging one first.
Challenging wise was probably Dr. Fate, because we really got to delve into that story. And the challenge was the work that went into designing the inside of the Tower of Fate. Because we wanted it to be the same idea, which is that sort of Escher staircases everywhere. But I had said, look, you know, this is an entity that spanned time. Let's put in architecture from everywhere, and it's like inside is temples from every era, from every place on the globe. And now I have to draw that, and I had to do a couple of double-page spreads with that kind of information over a couple of issues, and that was in itself challenging, but super satisfying once it's done.
So, talking about the research, you had to go through how many ancient civilizations and, you know, all that artistic styles over the millennia. How many did you go through?
Oh, look, I don't know that I kept a count, but it was really, I was looking at every ancient civilization that had interesting architecture and or statuary, and just sort of design features that would be obvious that I could, you know, represent visually in a comic, and then start sort of blending some of them as well. So that's half the fun.
So, what was the funnest character to revise? What was your personal favourite?
My personal favourite was Alan, just because I liked that we were making him our team leader, that he was just naturally an alpha male guy that everyone just sort of fell in line with. But I liked that he was incidentally gay, that it was just not a big deal. We weren't fanfaring about it, unlike Marvel. But I think my favorite one to, like, my favorite character to draw the bunch was Jay Garrick. Yeah. You know, I loved his physical awkwardness, and you know, certainly for the first couple of story arcs, his inability to really understand the scope of his power and to physically handle it. He was a lot of fun to draw.
Now, you mentioned the diversity, and it's fantastic that there is a book like this. I mean, you guys got to introduce the first African-American Superman.
Yeah.
You had plenty of females on the team as well, which is really
Which
important.
was great, yeah.
You also, like you mentioned, had a homosexual character. Did that happen organically as the characters were being created, or was that something that you were concerned with and the creative team wanted to make sure that a multitude of peoples were represented in the book?
Yeah, look, it was absolutely an agenda from the beginning, because the nature of the Earth 2 book, unlike the rest of the DCU, was there are like 51 books for the DCU and one book for Earth 2. And so we really were conscious of making sure we represented as many people as we could as we introduced more characters. And when Tom took over from James Robinson, he was just as passionate about the agenda. In fact, kind of more so. We got a lot more female characters all of a sudden, and a greater ethnic scope.
Yep. Now, when you introduced those characters, I felt that they were naturally presented. And that's sort of a hard thing to do in comics because, like you just mentioned with Marvel, it was a big event. We've got the first gay marriage. It's so important. You have to pick up this book. But with Earth 2, it felt like a natural progression with the characters. How did you manage to pull that off without dipping into that the territory of, wow, look at this?
Right. Well, part of it was how we handled the media of it. You know, just sort of being a little more low-key. Part of it was we weren't offering a double-page spread for an engagement shot. You know, it was one panel on a 5-panel page, and it was part of a character conversation. You know, we were being very conscious of not grand gesturing our tokenism and just sort of honestly making it incidental, you know, and part of that was, you know, scripting it so it's not, here's a big splash page to go, wow, diversity. And part of it was me sort of knowing that we wanted to avoid that obviousness, and just sort of be a little more incidental with these introductions or these moments.
So, one last DC question, and then we'll talk about your upcoming project.
Yeah.
The New 52 is over. Apparently. How'd you feel that the New 52 went? Was it good, bad, mixed? How'd you feel about it?
I think as an event, it was fantastic. I think it, you know, really worked in terms of what they were trying to do. I feel like it would have been better served if they knew it was a limited idea and that they were prepared for the 18-month later bit. And I don't think they were quite as prepared for the 18-month mark of how to spread it out and get it back to creator-driven content. Because they're only just starting to manage that now. And I feel like once the initial buzz of the New 52 wore off, they'd kind of lost a lot of strong voices. So I'm kind of really excited to see what they do now, because from what I understand, they're really opening it up to be as accommodating as possible and diverse as possible. So I'm hoping that that makes for a really interesting series of books.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, James Gordon as Batman.
I know, right?
Could have seen that.
Fun. I don't know that that's going to last terribly long, but
I'm really enjoying
fun that they're getting to do stuff like this.
Exactly. Now, enough about DC. Let's put that to the side.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're doing now.
I'm currently working on a creator-owned project. It's my big first creator-owned project with Greg Rucka. It's coming out from Image. It's called Black Magic. He and I have been talking about this project in one form or another for about 5 years. We've been talking about it seriously for the last 2. I've been working on it all this year, so we've got a number of issues in the can ready to go. I'm painting it. We're referring to it as a witch noir genre. So it's a little bit occult. It's a little bit police procedural. It's a little bit thriller. And it's really, really fun to be this invested in what I'm producing, because I'm a little bit of a control freak, but when you work in sort of mainstream comics, you have to just kiss that goodbye and be a good team player and let it go. You know, you can't you can't control everything. You just have to acknowledge that you're part of the machine. It's the only way to really emotionally survive it.
Yeah.
And with this project, Image essentially says, we will publish it, but you do it. And so, you know, it was just Greg and I for a little while, and then we brought in our own editor. We brought in our own graphic designer. I brought in a colorist. Greg brought in a letterer. And between this sort of tight team of myself, Greg, Eric Troutman, Janine Schaefer, our colorist and our letterer, we're like a really collaborative group, but everyone's got their job to do. And we've all got the same agenda, just make the book as good as possible. And it's going really well.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Image is pushing more to that creator-owned model. They've had amazing success with Saga, with Matthew K. Bourne.
Yep.
And why do you think they're so invested in reaching out to, giving the reins over to the creators? Why are they choosing that business model? Do you think it's just because of Saga, or have they always planned it?
No, Image was created by creators. It was meant to be a creator-owned driven publisher. And like everything in the industry, its success has ebbed and flowed. And I feel like over the last 5 years in particular, as mainstream comics have becoming, New 52 being a prime example, a less creative space for big, strong voices, they've needed to facilitate that elsewhere. Saga isn't the first big book to come out of Image, but it's one of the big books that's happening now. And Image's market share is getting bigger and bigger over the last couple of years because all of these sort of really high-end A-list talents have been pulling away from mainstream and going, I want to do my own thing. And Image is facilitating that with a really good deal, and really allowing everybody to do what they want to do. And just say, we'll publish it, knock yourselves out.
And look, in my personal opinion of reading comic books for as long as I have, that's probably the best way to do it.
It's the best. Some of the stuff that's coming out from Image is the best stuff on the market.
Absolutely. Now, we won't take up too much more of your time. You're being so accommodating.
It's a pleasure.
This has been Matthew Soul with the Modern Meltdown, and I've been here today, very lucky, to speak with Nicola Scott.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much. See you next time.